What do CEOs need to know about sales these days? A lot. Outdated sales strategies and tactics plague most companies today. Listen to what innovative CEOs and experts have to say about how to change all that with Sales Talk for CEOs. Welcome to Sales Talk for CEOs. As usual, I have a guest that you will just love. Today, I'm talking to what I call a reluctant entrepreneur. Sometimes I call myself an accidental entrepreneur, and I can tell you more about that another day. But this particular reluctant entrepreneur really never planned to start a business at that time. He was working with another company and doing such a great job with one of his customers that they decided that he should do more, go big, or go home. And so he did become a CEO. And here to tell us his story about how all of this happened is Justin Rende from Rhymetec. Hi, Justin.
Hi, Alice. It's nice to meet you.
Great to have you here today to tell your story. And tell us first, just a little bit, like, what does Rhymetec do?
Sure. So, Rhymetec is a cybersecurity services firm. We're based out of New York City. We provide cybersecurity services and build and manage InfoSec and data privacy programs for modern SaaS-based businesses. So, we have around 600 clients globally, and we are, as I mentioned before, we're based in New York City.
Okay, so for everyone out there who isn't really familiar with cybersecurity, like, what do you protect those SaaS companies from?
We protect their data. So typically, our customers have built some sort of application that ingests end user data. So you could think of Instagram as an example. They have a lot of end user data within their application, and we build programs to keep that data safe so that no one can hack in and steal end user data.
Because that actually really happens. We read about it in the news
Yes,
every single day
it
that
does.
people's datas have been compromised. My data was compromised and I had someone using my identity. It was so much fun to have to clean that up. So your company never wants to be the reason that someone's having a very bad day because their data was stolen, right?
Correct. Yes, that's exactly it.
All right. Well, let's rewind back to 9 years ago when you very first started this company. What were you doing just before you started, and how did you come to be a CEO reluctantly?
Yeah. So I was working for another consulting firm, technology consulting firm, and I was doing a lot of work for them, but I was really kind of independent, doing it on my own, just kind of had their name. But in terms of putting resources and everything together, it was really just on me to do that. And I was working with them, and one of my longtime clients that I've known for years, based in New York City, they're a large law firm in New York City. They had asked me to come in and do a penetration test, which is really it's ethical hacking, where you hack into people's networks,
Oh,
show
wait,
them all the
wait.
whole.
So you on purpose hack their network to see if you can hack their network.
The team of people I hired did
Okay.
for me, but yes, that's the goal, right? We hack people's networks and then we show them, or their applications typically, and then we show them how we did that so that they can fix those holes before someone that actually
Okay.
wants to steal from them is able to exploit those vulnerabilities. Um, so yeah, a law firm in New York City had hired me to come in and do a penetration test on their network. A pretty prestigious law firm, well known, big law firm. I ended up kind of putting together a team of people to do this, and found all the right resources and everything that they needed to satisfy this penetration test. And we went in and we did a really good job. We ended up hacking them in a ton of different ways, showing them all these holes and exposures that they had that they didn't know about in their network and in their systems, that exposed a lot of data that wouldn't be good if you're a law firm. And so they were happy and sad about that. It's always kind of like when you tell people, "Hey, we've hacked you a million ways." They're happy that you found those holes, but they're also kind of, you're telling the people that built the InfoSec program, so it's kind of a weird conversation to have. So we told them about this, and they fixed it, and they were ultimately very happy because we were able to kind of protect some of their customers' data. They have some pretty prestigious customers and clients themselves, so we did a great job. And because of that, they said, and because of the long-standing relationship that I'd had with them, they had approached me after we'd done the work for them, and they said, "Hey, Justin, we have an opportunity for you. They said, one of our clients also needs a penetration test. And they said, if you're willing to do it, like, we'd love to give you this as a referral. But because, again, I'd known these people for years, and they had known me, I talked to them a little bit about maybe starting my own business in the past. And they said, but you did such a great job, and we know that you really did all of this yourself and didn't have to rely on your old consulting firm very much for any sort of assistance through this. So they said, what we want is, we want to refer you into this customer. But the only way we will do this is if you start your own business to do that.
The
And
magic
so,
words. If you
yeah,
start your own business. So you had a little bit of an inkling. You were thinking maybe you would start a business. You weren't really thinking of doing it that minute. But
yeah.
when this tremendous opportunity came along, I mean, how can you pass it up, right?
Yep, I think one of the things that I'm best at is really identifying opportunities and then having really the guts to go after it. And so I realized that this was a once in a lifetime opportunity. I thought about starting my own business in the past, but I never had it kind of just offered up onto me on a plate like that, especially with a really prestigious law firm who has really prestigious customers. So I was like, oh, yeah, why, this seems like a great idea. So right after they told me that, I went home and I quickly, like, put together a website on, like, Wix. It was took me like a day to do it. Hired a lawyer, got some contracts in place, like, put all of, like, the legal and the logistical stuff in place to make it happen. I think that was probably the busiest 48 hours of my life, getting all of that stuff together. And
Become a
then
CEO overnight. So you should write that book,
exactly,
How to Become a CEO Overnight, How to
don't
Start
sleep.
Open a Business Overnight. Yeah, don't sleep, just 48 hours straight. Here's your checklist, do all these things, right? I love
Yep,
that. I love it. Okay, so here you are. You've quickly put together the basics. It's just you. Now,
yep.
I know you have some resources because you use them, right, to do that hacking. So what happened next? You have one customer. Tell us about what happened next.
So we ended up approaching. So they told me who the customer was. It was a very prestigious customer. I was shocked at the level of prestigiousness of the customer that they sent me, because it was a big deal, and it was a great opportunity for me to start my own company with this customer. And so I ended up putting, like I said, putting together all of the logistical stuff, reaching out to the customer, saying, "Hey, I was referred to you by this law firm," and well, they had actually made the introduction. And so I just followed up and then set up a couple meetings with them and did my sales spiel, and sold them on doing a penetration test for them as well. And then we did one for them as well. I put together the same. I actually used the same resources that I had put together to do the one for the law firm. So I'd use those same resources to work for the law firm's client that they had referred me into, and we did another really good pen test. And this was someone that you wouldn't expect would have holes in their information security program for us to exploit. So we actually found quite a few, and they were, again, very impressed and also upset that we had kind of found all of these vulnerabilities. But because of the nature of the data that they had and the sensitivity of it, they were really happy that we were able to find these so that they could fix these before, again, someone that had malicious intentions would have found them and stole from them. So we did another really good pen test for that customer. And then because of that, it started to kind of snowball into doing penetration tests for other, let's call them high net worth customers. So a lot of, like, law firms, a lot of hedge funds, those types of New York based companies that have a lot of wealth, essentially, and a lot of reasons to protect that wealth. So we did a good job on that first one that we got referred to, that we started the business with, and that snowballed into other penetration testing work with other high net wealth companies in primarily New York.
So, some key things there that you probably didn't even realize, but once I say them, you're going to go, oh, yeah, that's exactly right. So, you got in with a great customer, that big law firm, right? That prestigious
Mm-hmm.
law firm. You didn't just do the job, you did a great job. Really important, especially for founders when you're first starting out. It's always important to do a great job. Unfortunately, we don't always do it, but you did. They were so impressed. They wanted you to help someone else that they knew that was, vulnerable and high status, right? Somebody who can't
Mm-hmm.
afford to be hacked, right? Can't afford to have a data breach. And so you did the work for them. And again, you did a great job, right? And then you mentioned the snowball effect. So once
Mm-hmm.
you've done a great job, people know people, right? And they say, oh my gosh, if we have these vulnerabilities, you might have these vulnerabilities too. You better talk to Justin right away.
Yep.
I would imagine
Exactly.
that's how it happened. So
Yeah.
your network, right? And you hear people say this all the time, your network is your net worth. This is
Mhm.
how we begin. This is how we move about in our ecosystem when we're beginning. But people forget you can continue to do that even 9, 10, 20 years, 30 years later. All right. So here you are with people telling other people, and it's just you and maybe some resources. So how do you begin to fill in and grow the company, hire the people that you need, and continue your sales?
Yeah. So I was primarily doing it. This was in 2015, and I was primarily just doing penetration testing at that point in time for these high sort of net worth, wealth, and high status companies. I liked it. It was a good paycheck as well. But I was pretty used to always having a full time job where I would be getting paid bi-monthly or once a month or something, and having that consistency in my paycheck. And while I was getting paid large paychecks from these high net wealth companies that we were doing the pen testing for, it was inconsistent. And so I would do one pen test, and then it might be 2 more months before I had another pen
Right, you
test.
do a project and then you're done. It's over. So there's nothing more there
Yeah.
until you get another project.
Yep. And so and just because of the way that I wanted to live my lifestyle and how I essentially invest in managing money would be having that consistency, knowing that I have a paycheck coming in like day after day or month after month, and knowing that being able to forecast that money, and also taking the stress out of my life of constantly being like, what's next? What am I going to have to chase after? So I wanted to kind of change my business model, and stop working only with these sort of like high net wealth companies and doing penetration testing for them. And frankly, I was younger at the time. I had a lot of friends that worked in startups and SaaS based businesses. And so I was like, these companies need security services too. So why don't I start reaching out to some smaller startup based businesses, 30 to 100 employees, typically going to be SaaS based, building an application because they're kind of more new age companies. And so I wanted to reach out to them and offer them pen testing services, but not only just allow them to do penetration testing with us, like allow them to, we'll do a pen test, but since they're smaller companies, allow them to spread that payment out over a couple months or something, because that works out better for me to have that consistency. And it also was just like better for them because a lot of these smaller companies don't have the capital for a large capital expense all at once that a pen test can cost. So having them be able to spread it out was beneficial to them. And I quickly learned when I was prospecting these customers and starting to do penetration tests for these sort of SaaS-based startups that there was a huge hole in the market for security services in general for SaaS-based companies. There's a lot of people out there that had a lot of security expertise, but it was based on a totally different infrastructure, which was a lot of on-prem work. So a lot of like, how do you secure your SQL environment that you have like on-prem somewhere on your office or something like that, or how do you really build out a effective and manage a really smart, effective firewall for your office assets and things like that. So there was a lot of expertise around that, but not a lot of expertise around cloud security because it was relatively new at the time. And so I knew that cloud was kind of the way that the industry was going. And I knew that while the majority of the money and resources weren't put around cloud at this point in time, I wanted to align my business with that model, frankly, for a few reasons. One, I was working with other startups and I was a startup, so I could relate to them. And that helped me in the sales process because could be more relatable to the other executives because I'm kind of going through the same things that they were going through. So that was one of the reasons. And then really just to kind of, um, frankly, take advantage of that huge hole in the market because I didn't see a lot of competition out there focusing on that. I still saw a lot of people focused on on-prem security. And so in around 2017, we started offering not only just penetration tests, but CISO as a service, so virtual CISO services to these startups as well, where we would essentially do a pen test for them, but then we would also build and manage their infosec programs from the ground up. And so we would be their essentially their security expertise in house. And I would take those. I built out a team of CISOs here at Rhymetec, and I would take that one CISO who normally would be at one person's account, I'd spread them out over 3 or 4 different accounts so that it made it affordable for startups. They don't necessarily need someone full time anyway. And they had a subject matter expert that could provide them with the security needs that they wanted.
Okay, so this is genius, right? So here you are in the market getting big paychecks for doing something that people really need, right? Especially these high net worth people who have a lot to lose if they get hacked, right? They have a lot of data, their reputation, they need people to trust them. They can't be hacked. So you're fixing that for them, which is fantastic, right? And then you're like, okay, yeah, but this is kind of project by project. So we've got some peaks and valleys here that aren't comfortable at all, right? And you've got some resources that are helping you do all this, but then there's these lulls. So you think, okay, what can I do? I need to find a niche, right? And maybe you weren't thinking those exact things, but that's what your brain was telling you. Like, so where else can I go with this? And what else can I offer? What's the need in the marketplace? So you had a little bit of a crystal ball there, I think, because you were on top of things and you were watching the industry and you're like, cloud. Okay, let's really ride that one because that's coming. That is, I mean, it's here. It was probably here by then, but people just hadn't really grasped onto it yet. So you're like, okay, this is coming. This is a thing. It's not managing all of those servers and stuff on the premises, like you were saying, but managing all of this in the cloud and how can we do it in, and of course, being a startup yourself, it seems sort of natural. You're techie to go to, technology startups. It's something you know. And I think when we find a niche like that, it's like we have a solution that fits this niche. You could have gone to manufacturers too, but when you spread yourself too thin, it doesn't work. And it's like, hey, I'm a tech guy who does this for tech guys or gals. I don't, when I say guy, I mean everybody, but for people, right? I do this for everyone. I can really help your company because I understand what you need. And because I know you're a startup too, I can make it affordable. I can make it happen in a way that you can afford to pay for it. So
And I can relate to you as a business
yeah.
owner and as someone that's running a business. It's much easier for me to relate to another founder of a startup than it is to relate to a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund. I wish I could relate to a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund, but I'm just not
Yeah,
at that
or
point.
some 30-year-old manufacturing family-owned business. I mean, it's just right.
Yep.
So I love it because when you do that, you stay in your niche, you stay in your comfort, and then those awkward moments are like few and far between, right? You're not trying to be somebody that you're not. You're working in a niche you feel comfortable in, the lingo, and you can just chat with people. So you started reaching out. So now the business isn't just flying in because they don't even know you exist, right?
I had to
So
go find it.
you have to outbound to these startups, these tech startups, and say, hey, I'm here and I can really help you. And you can even afford it. And then once we, find all your vulnerabilities and tell you how to fix them, now we even have somebody who's going to help make sure it gets done. We have a CISO for you, a fractional CISO that's going to make sure this happens. And again, it's going to be affordable. All right. So let's talk about how did you start collecting these CISOs so that you could provide this service? And do your CISOs also sell? Like, do they go out and find new business, or do they just serve the business you have? And how are you now then at this point bringing in these tech startups? How are you outreaching to them and finding them?
So at the beginning, when we first started to grow and I first needed to start onboarding CISOs, we put them through a pretty extensive training process because, again, there wasn't a wide net that we could cast out to go out there and find a lot of talent because there's still today is a talent shortage in cybersecurity, but specifically for this niche, there was a really small pool to pick from. So we would really pick from someone that had some sort of security or technology background, and then we'd put them through a pretty intensive training program before we ever got to put them in front of customers. And so I brought on a business partner when I started doing the CISO work who kind of understood this network as well. And so he developed the training program, he developed kind of what we would do, and then he was really responsible for going out and sourcing and finding those people, where then the division of the responsibilities was my job was to go out and do marketing and sales and the go-to-market aspect of the business. And so he was onboarding and filling the staff for the business that I was bringing in. And I was really focused at that point in time because I knew that we had a great offering. I was like, this is something that's needed by a lot of companies. And so my goal in those early years was just to get our name out there and to get what we do out there, because I knew that it wasn't even like a nice to have kind of sell. It was almost like companies had to have us because a lot of companies need to have certain security controls in place, specifically if they're ingesting end user data before they can even bring their product to market. And so it made it almost an easier sell because they would have to have us build these security programs for them before
Right,
they could
right.
even go to market with their
So
product.
what were you actually doing? Like, were you going to trade shows? How did you find out where these CEOs were hanging
Oh
out of these
yeah, so
startups?
a lot. I did a lot of different things. It was pretty grueling in the beginning, but I actually miss it now that I'm not doing it as much. So I did everything from, I mean, strictly just cold calling, just going to trade shows, a lot of prospecting just through LinkedIn, sending out emails, cold emails, just the regular sort of like cadence that you would do when you really don't have a wide net of customers and you're kind of starting out. I did all of that, but I also remember, so before, when I was in my 20s, early 20s, there was a period where I worked in film in New York City before I worked in tech because I was younger and just cared about having a cool job that got me into clubs and cool exposure. So I worked in the film industry for a while, and I remember when I worked in film, I used to get like in New York City, you'll get packages messenger to you in the entertainment industry all the time when it'll be like, oh, well, this must be important. Someone like spent the money to like have a bike messenger this to me. It's in like a nice envelope. Like they delivered it right to me. It didn't just go to like the mailroom or someone brought it up from the mailroom right away because it seems important. So I remember the feeling I would get. And even if you just get it and you're like, oh, it's a contract, it's like when you unbox a new iPhone, like you're like, oh, the unboxing's so wonderful. But then you start it and you're like, oh, it's just an iPhone, just like my old iPhone. But that feeling of like the unboxing of something new, it's great. And it's nice packaging. So I remembered from that feeling that I used to get in film when I would open something like that and how it made me feel like great. And so one of the things that I did that was unique, and I actually really, I love this, and I still talk about it today, is I would go and I would buy, I bought like I had some Rhymetec stock paper printed on like a really nice stock with really nice logo. And I'd pick like 20 different prospects that I was going after, specifically in New York City. And I would ride my bike all over New York City at this point in time. I'd write handwritten notes. I'd email them a few times. And if I didn't get a response, then I'd write a handwritten note and I'd put it in a really nice envelope that looked like it came from a bike messenger. When I started the company, I didn't have the budget for a bike messenger to bike messenger all of these things all over New York City for me. So I actually did it myself, and I would run it down into the mailroom of these large buildings. And so the people would get this, that I was prospecting, would get this nice piece of stock paper in a nice envelope that was what they thought messengered to them by a bike messenger, and they didn't know it was the CEO because it went to the mailroom first. And they would open it, and it would just be like, "Hey, this is Justin from Rhymetec. I've reached out to you a few times. I thought I would just send you a quick note. I'm also New York City based, and I would love to chat with you about the security services we offer. I know that there's a huge hole in the market for this, and this may be something that you're interested in, or something to that extent." And 9 times out of 10, I would get a call back when I did that. Because it's just, for me, it was like, how am I, after working in tech sales for a long period of time, it's like you can cold call people, you can email people, and no matter what you do, you have to stand out. And there has to be a way to make you differentiate yourself from all the millions of cold calls and emails they're getting all day long. And so I knew that if I just did something a little bit different, and if I made people feel a little bit special by getting some sort of package or something that wasn't just like, oh, a piece of letter in the mail, like that they would be more responsive to it. And it worked, frankly. It was one of the fastest ways to ramp up that part of the business early on, was by doing that.
I love it. Make people feel special. Oh my
Mm-hmm.
goodness. I mean, I've never heard of a CEO doing anything like that before, but it's absolutely ingenious, right? Just get out there and do it. And what I love is that this method worked because it was different and it was special. All the cold outreach is not working now, for so many reasons. We won't even get into that today. But you did something different. And it reminds me of a book called How to Get a Meeting with Anyone by Stu Heineck. I don't know if you know him or if you ever read that. He's
I
also
haven't heard that name.
written another book called Grow Your Business Like a Weed, and he teaches you how to get an unfair advantage. And one of the ways to get an unfair advantage refers back to his first book, which is How to Get a Meeting with Anyone. And he does the kind of thing you're talking about. He did it for himself. He's a cartoonist. I forgot, for someone big like the New York Times, he's a cartoonist, but cartoonists, that's not going to make it, right? You've got to also do some other kind of work. And when he started his business, he would draw cartoons of the company and the CEO and put them in a nice envelope and send them to them, with the message that he wanted to meet with them. You think they met with them? Of course they did. They get a
Yeah, make someone
personalized,
remember you.
right?
Make
I
them
mean,
remember you. Yep.
and so they remembered and they wanted to meet with him and they felt special, like you mentioned. And he got the meetings and he thought, wow, I could teach other people to do this. They're not cartoonists. They can't maybe send a cartoon, but they can send something, right? And actually, he did develop a program where he would draw cartoons for his customers that were specific to the company they were trying to land, and let them use those cartoons, right, to get that. So I think it's just fascinating. But also, you've probably heard of Gary Vaynerchuk,
Mhm.
and his story is fascinating. Also, how he started with his family business, and overnight changed things there. But he tried to get some meetings with some pretty high up people in the beginning and wasn't able to. But this story, I don't know if I had it exactly right, but he was stalking this guy on social media and figured out that he really loved this one ball player. I think it was basketball player. And he, called this guy. He did everything. He tried to get a meeting with him, couldn't. So he got a signed jersey of that ball player and
Yeah.
framed it and sent it to the guy's office. I mean, it was, potential for a huge deal. Obviously, you do something like that, it's going to cost you a lot of money, but it worked. So he made the guy feel special. He did something that was recognized by that person as, oh my gosh, how did you know my favorite player? Like, how cool is that? And I think that we overlook these things sometimes. We just stick with the basic cold calling stuff. And even though there's a lot of gift services out there now where you can send people gifts, and
It's not
and
personal.
follow up, right? So anyway, I think that's just ingenious. All right, so you were your own bike messenger, riding all over New York City to find these startup CEOs and hand delivering stuff to them, and they were meeting with you, so it was working. Now,
Yep.
holy cow! At what point was it like, okay, I'm trying to be the CEO, my partner's trying to get these CISOs trained, I'm trying to do all the selling, I'm riding around town on my bike, like, okay, we've got to get some more help here selling, and we've got to get some more help doing some other things. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, so I would say that this was probably like I was probably like a year of really riding around on my bike and starting to kind of get business that way. And then we probably at that this was let's say like early 2019. We probably had maybe 20 customers, but we were starting to kind of make a name for ourselves in this sort of startup world, and people had heard of us now. So I didn't have to do as much bike riding, but because of that, we were getting a lot of referral business in at once. We also had partnered
Mm.
with some security software platforms out there that also help you become compliant, or they help you really build. They're just in some aspect they can help manage one aspect of your security program. So we started to partner with them, and they realized the benefit of having a MSP or a CISO attached to their software, because then their customers were really understanding the full value of it. And so we were starting to receive a lot of leads from both just word of mouth from our services as well as from these software providers. And so we were receiving a pretty high volume of leads every day. And I was like, okay, this is too much for me to handle now as a salesperson. I'm also, the business is growing, and I have like a lot of other things that I need to be focused on. So I started to look for another salesperson in really 2019, 2020. And I ended up hiring one person at that time, and brought them on, and they did a good job for a year. I was still primarily responsible, I think, for kind of facilitating initial relationships with a lot of these partners or a lot of these customers. But that person really came on and helped me with taking a lot of the sales meetings, like after I would set up that initial relationship, fulfilling contracts, doing kind of like a lot of the sales ops stuff. But that was a lot of the stuff that was kind of bogging me down. So it allowed me to free myself up to focus more on high level business stuff, as well as kind of more strategic selling into different customers, and building stronger relationships with them. So yeah, in around 2019, 2020, we hired that salesperson, and then they really worked underneath me doing sales ops and facilitating everything. And then they kind of grew into managing and doing sales themselves. And then that person actually moved on about a year and a half ago. And then we brought on another salesperson as well as a CSM to manage our existing business, because this was now we have close to 600 accounts, so we
Wow.
have to have another. We can't just have the account manager who is doing outbound also be responsible for managing those internal accounts. So we started to build out an entire go-to-market team and really bring on a marketing person and other salespeople, and we've just been growing since then, and continually kind of hiring and growing our go-to-market team since then. But I always share the stories with them about how I used to ride my bike around and things like that, because I think it's really for what I want them to understand is, like, I think sales
It's
a big
relevant,
part.
right. It's relevant,
Yeah,
and we need to take hold of that, yeah. Yeah, so it's
yeah.
interesting because I think a lot of CEOs at first, they just wanna hire someone to take all the sales away from them. You didn't do that, which is so smart because,
I'm a
um
salesperson that accidentally became a CEO.
right, right, so you know, right, and you know how hard it is, and you know how hard it is to train someone else to do it, so I love that the approach that you took. It's like, "Hey, here are the things I need off my plate on the sales end of things. I still can close these deals, and I still can have these high-level conversations, but I need you to do some of these things." And I think that for me and for the CEOs that I've worked with and from what I've watched over all these years, is that works best because they come in kind of under your wing, they're learning from you, they're taking pieces of the sales process and doing them while watching you do the other pieces, becoming more and more familiar with you, the company, the way you do business, the way you handle customers. And then they're really able to actually take stuff from you and you feel confident and you trust them to do it. And they
Mhm.
grow into, like you said, they grow into, right, that next position. And it, while also relieving you of some of the things that are just overwhelming. And then you see, okay, you build it from there, right? I also like that you mentioned the CSM model. And I think this is so important. Like, something that we miss sometimes, or we don't maybe take it as seriously as we should, which is that once we've sold it, we need our customers to be successful using it,
Mhm.
right? We need it to actually give them a return on their investment. We need it to work, right? And the salespeople should at some point get so busy that they can't tend to every customer anymore. But we can have this beautiful model of customer success people, wrapped in with sales and our customers, making this really nice symbiotic relationship. So the customers feel the care, the
Mhm.
love, and the customer success people can communicate back with sales like, hey, you need to go and talk about this, or you need to do that. I can handle this part. I need you to handle that part. So that sounds like it's a great model. It's working for you.
Yep. We also do, so our CSMs do sales themselves. It's just how I've kind of divided it up is our account executives are primarily responsible for bringing in new business to the company, and that can be forged through partnerships or however they bring in new business. Once we've signed an account, it then goes over to the CSM, but we have our customers are on monthly retainers with us because they typically sign multi-year retainers with us where we're building these programs. And throughout that process, there's also other things that we could be selling that they may want to buy. They may want to buy a penetration test. They may want to do some vulnerability scanning. They may want to do a whole level of additional services that's really AppSec related and more proactive services that we offer. That's kind of not our baseline model, and they kind of build into that rather than buying it from the start. And our CSMs are responsible for selling those products. So once they are an existing customer, and our CSMs are talking to these people and building relationships with them and making sure they're happy, they're also responsible and incentivized for selling services to or selling additional services to customers once we've already brought them on board.
Excellent. I love that model. Now, I'm curious, I'm sure everybody listening is curious too. Are your sellers riding around town on bicycles delivering things?
No, unfortunately not. I wish they were, but we're too global now. I think when I started the company, I was really heavily based in New York City, and that made that easy. But our team is all over the U.S. Our customers are all over the world, and so I think prospecting now is a little bit harder as we have so much more of a wider base of customers that they're not centralized in one location where someone can really ride their bike around. But I do still encourage them to think outside the box. I think really that's the only way
Yeah,
in
what's
a
the
in an
equivalent
industry.
of riding your bike around, right? Globally.
Yeah, yeah. Get in front of people and be confident. Like understand what we sell. Be proud of what you sell, and then your message will come across with confidence. I noticed when I was doing sales and other jobs and I wasn't really confident in the company I worked for or the services or whatever it was that I was selling, it resonated in my tone. And so I think one of the things I have my team do is really like, I don't want them to sell Rhymetec unless they truly believe in Rhymetec. And so I have to make sure that they truly believe in what we do, because then things are easier to sell, because you're just speaking the truth and you understand the value and you can articulate that to the customers. If you don't really understand that, then you're making it up, and it's not as clean of a sale, and it makes it harder for the salesperson to do that.
Yeah. So you have to hire people who care about helping people, because
Yes.
really with what you do, you are really helping people prevent disastrous situations, prevent panic and
Yeah.
prevent lawsuits. I mean, you really are helping people with something they absolutely have to have. They have to know about, they have to make changes. And you want to hire people who want to do that, right? Not
Yep.
just go sell something, but want to really help these small businesses, these startups, so that those startups can not worry about their security, but go do what they're meant to do in the marketplace, right?
Focus on their core competency and not have to worry
Yeah.
about all of this stuff. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I love that. Well, if you want your sellers to get a little boost on that creative thinking, have them read How to Get a Meeting with Anyone by Sue Heineck,
Okay.
because I'm telling you, they'll get some pretty good ideas, and maybe they can, execute some of those as well. It has been such a pleasure to talk to you and learn about your journey.
Okay.
Love to talk to CEOs who are doing something unique or different. And it sounds like you have really built an amazing business.
Thank you. Yes, I'm proud of what we've built here at Rhymetec. So thanks.
So just tell everyone where they can find you in case they thought, oh my gosh, I need that. I don't know what the security's like at my company. Maybe you can
For
try and
sure.
hack me.
Yeah. I think you posted my LinkedIn page there, so feel free to connect to me on LinkedIn. Our website is www.rhymetec.com. That has all of our contact info on there as well. Feel free to reach out if you have questions. If you are not a SaaS-based company, if you just have security questions, you're a startup and just want to understand what you need to do to grow and scale securely, happy to have conversations with anyone in this network and really help out anyone in any way we can.
And as always, if you connect with Justin on LinkedIn, you need to tell him that you heard him on my show, Sales Talk for CEOs. Well, again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Alice.
Really enjoyed meeting you and talking with you.
Yep, this was great. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.